Good afternoon. I come to you on a not terribly nice Minnesota afternoon. It's been crappy all morning, but just as I was setting up the camera, the sun did decide to show its cowardly face. Looking at the weather, that's not supposed to hold up. It's supposed to be gray, windy, and cold. Um, but that's the nature of spring in Minnesota, I guess. That aside, I am here for a video that's different than my usual weekend end notes. This weekend, I mostly did a lot of writing, and then I did a whole bunch of bookcase organizing, which I'll go over with you. Then also on Saturday, I went to Art Whirl, which is a great event here in Northeast Minneapolis. So I was doing a bunch of odd things, and I thought this would be something different, and you all might enjoy it. So a week or two ago, I was in Boston, as many of you know, and I bought a dump truck full of books and completely insanely shipped them all back to myself. I think, well, nearly all of them anyhow, but I think it was a total of 6 boxes or something in that range. And they were all here as of last week at some point. So this weekend, I pulled off tons of books off my bookcases, made piles to take out to little free libraries, moved things around, and reconfigured a lot of my library, and took all the books I purchased and put them in their rightful spots. So I thought what I would do in this video is show you my bookcases, show you the changes that I made, also go over some of the bookcases I didn't touch, and say what I'm thinking about doing them, because naturally once you start this kind of project, as all you bookish people know, it's really hard to stop. So the ones that I didn't touch, and I'm even looking at a couple of them now, as I sit on the couch working or reading, I look up at them and the wheels start turning. So maybe that'll be something for next weekend. But I'm going to go over all of that with you, and since I have bookcases all over my little apartment, it'll probably be effectively an apartment tour as well. So with that, this is something different. Let's get into the books.
So I thought I would start over by the door here just so you have a good sense of the way my living room is set up. I have the couch there that I spend most of my time on. I work from it. You can see my work laptop there and my personal computer there. I read from there, I write from there, I relax from there. It's just the perfect spot because to the right there I have my four main bookcases so I can easily look up to them. Behind there I have a small table that I place the books I'm currently working on the books I'm currently working on. And then there's a lamp on top, so if I don't want to turn on the headlight or the big lamp in the corner there, that's sufficient for reading. And right behind it are more books, so I'm just constantly surrounded by books. There's the built-in bookcase that came with the apartment. Of course, it came with the apartment, it's built in. um, and then these two organizers I got from Target. And the nice thing about them is they're open on both sides, as we'll see. And they're thick enough to where I can have 2 rows of book with the spines spacing out, or facing out, excuse me, either way. And it makes for a nice closed-in space. And then, of course, I have the love seat here. So when I have company over, I can move the little table right there and they can place their wine on it. Somebody does have to use a bookcase for wine, but that's okay. And then I just put mine on the windowsill or the little table there. And it makes for a great gathering area in addition to a nice relaxation space. Okay, so let's press on here. This is my coffee table, and the sweet thing about it, I won't do it right now, is the top is on hinges and it lifts up and forward. So if I want to sit upright, which frankly isn't very often, I can pull the table up, sit up and type from my computer or eat or do whatever. It's a neat thing that I found thrift shopping. And then below it, or on the bottom, I have this organizer here, which I put all the current magazines in. I have this top box, which is full of New Yorker cartoons, and then my 2025 document box, and then some odds and ends on the bottom. So everything that I could possibly need is within my reach when I'm sitting on the couch. And then on the wall here, you can see plenty of New Yorker art, as we'll see as we go through this. My apartment is a small ode to the New Yorker. So this fantastic picture was in, I think, the last edition that came out in 2024, maybe the first one of 2025. This was also from last year, and I love this picture. I think it was an essay about reviewing, but the way the reviewer who's drawn there is laying is pretty much how I sit on the couch, so I like having that right above me. And then I have this cover from April, I think it says, yeah, that is just a nice spring-styled cover, so I wanted to put it out here, given the time of the the time of the year that I got that issue. And then also I have a framed copy of Rudyard Kipling's poem If, which I absolutely love. So it's nice just to have there and look up at it and read whenever I want to. And then I have more New Yorker cartoons. I won't zoom in on these ones, but I frame my favorites and scatter them around the apartment. Now in the window here, you can tell, well, first of all, from the way that I lay with my back against these pillows, I can see my plants. And the nice thing about the old apartment that I live in, it was built in 1926, is it has these hooks in the ceiling. And I have one here and then one in another room that aren't used yet. So I think I'm gonna go to Bachman's at some point of the next month and get a couple more plants to really fill in the apartment. And then on the bottom, I have more here. You can see some I'm propagating. Those I forgot about, and they're getting a little out of hand. But these purple plants, they used to be called wandering Jews, and now I think the politically correct term is wandering dudes. Either way, this was the initial one I got, and I trimmed it down to propagate. That's why it's so short, but then it was also just getting out of hand. But it's not growing back the way I want. So I think I need to propagate again, fill my propagation station there, dump this, and start a fresh pot of that plant. This was put together entirely out of propagated pieces, and it's looking really nice. It's a wild plant. I really love it, and I like that color purple. It looks really nice. And then turning here, oh, and then also, one thing I should also point out is I can see my parking lot from my couch, so I can see who's coming and going and see what creeps are cutting through the parking lot, and then also what's happening with the traffic. So I like that too. In the other apartments in my building, what I've noticed as I'm walking outside is people would put their couch on this wall and then their TV on this wall, because I think the cable box is behind where my couch is, but I don't have a TV. So I was able to set it this way, and I can look out the window from a more advantageous angle, I guess. So that's nice too. Anyway, looking at the bookcases here now, this is what I would call my bread and butter. These are the ones I consult the most, and they're my favorite subjects. The two on the right are the ones that I organized this weekend, as you can tell just from looking at them. And the two on the left are the ones that I definitely need to get to soon. And again, you can just tell from looking at it, there's more horizontal books, there's paper stuffed in there, and they need a lot of work, and that'll be more obvious when we get into them in more detail. There are 2 stacks of books on the floor. I just haven't decided where to put those yet. Those will be on the shelf soon. I just need to consult my other bookcases and see if I can make space, or I may just have to get rid of more books. They're in front of those bookcases because not all of them, like Command and Control, for example, not all of them would go on this bookcase, but some of them do fit, so that's why I have them in front of it. Anyway, before I get into them in detail, you'll notice about the 2 I reorganized on the right, my World War II bookcases, is that there is spare room, a remarkable thing. From time to time, I have, flashes of rationality, flashes of realism, and admit to myself that I'm going to be getting more World War II books. So when I knew I'd be working with 2 whole bookcases instead of the one dedicated to the subject that I had before, I intentionally set it up this way so that when those new books come in, I can add them to the shelves and not disturb the feng shui or the thematic organization that I have going on here. And so I was fairly impressed with myself for actually doing that. But on the left here, we have economics. That's the far left bookcase. And then the one next to it is, I guess, politics, but it's also essay collections and then some nonsense on the bottom now that I'm looking at it. Let's start with economics. So the way I used to have this organized was economic history at the top, and then it would bleed into schools of thought and theory, I guess. So you can see I have lots of free market economics together, and then as we go further down, we get into Keynesian economics, and this is a little bit of a mess, but also Marxist economics. But as I've gotten more books, I've just slapped things on the shelf like this, and then also have tended to throw new releases on the top. So for example, Capital, the new translation here of Volume 1, really ought to be down with the other books on Marxism, but I think I put it there because it's just a new release. And then there's also a couple other oddities. You'll notice Slouching Towards Utopia is here, but I have the ARC up top right there, so that ARC needs to go, and this volume needs to move up. Also, I have all these papers stuffed in here, there, horizontal, whatnot. And those are academic papers. that relate to the books that they're next to. And I printed them off because I go to them so much. So if I'm going to pull down, Ludwig von Mises or Pax Economica, the papers next to it are something I'm going to want too. But I think when I reorganize this shelf, those have to go. I have PDFs of all of them. I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure I have PDFs of all of them, and that ought to be enough. There's no reason to have papers smashed on the shelf with books. That's a disaster. So at the top, again, you can see some of that old thematic organization holding. We have works on economic history through here, and then some monetary theory here. Of course, we have Friedman and Schwartz classic volume, some newer stuff too. And then the one I guess I'm most in line with would be Deidre McCloskey's Bourgeois trilogy. It's a terribly, terribly self-indulgent trilogy, and she can be kind of an irritating writer, but there's so much good information in them, and the last volume in particular is just amazing. If you have been looking at these, I would say the last volume at least is well worth your time. But there's stuff in all of them that's good, so you just sort of have to know you're already interested in the subject if you're going to get them. I've actually been thinking about rereading Jonathan Levy's Ages of American Capitalism. We do not align, to put it mildly, but it is really rigorously done. I just know if I do reread that, I'm going to embark on an economic history reading project, and I don't think I can afford to do that until I finish my overviews of World War II reading project, so I'll probably hold off for now. I did read The Relentless Revolution earlier this year and wrote about it, actually, so I may go on to some of the more popular stuff, so like The Empire of Wealth or Land of Promise. Those I may read, and then as I get closer to finishing my World War II project, I'll delve into the heavier stuff. But that again is economic history, monetary theory, and new releases pretty much. This book on venture capital is actually probably the best book on the subject if you're interested. Anyway, let's press on here. So we're getting back into more schools of thought here. You can see some Tom Sowell. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Tom Sowell. When he's good, he's really good. When he's bad, he's really bad. I could probably get rid of basic economics. I don't consult that so often, but I'll think about it. The one of all of these I'd keep. If I had to get rid of all of them and choose one, even though this is a trilogy, this is a good trilogy, but his footnotes are pretty outdated, even for when they were written. But the one I would keep is Knowledge and Decisions, which is a really nice explication of Hayekian theory. Brauddel's trilogy here is awesome. I think a lot of people know his Mediterranean book better, but this is classic stuff, and although I don't agree with all of it, I also don't disagree with very much of it, and I consult them a lot. Also, I've been dreaming, I'm probably going to say this a lot as we go through my shelves, but I've been dreaming of reading right back through them again. This is a really bad book, actually. This can just go. This Religion and the Rise of Capitalism is awesome. Ben Friedman is great. I've been meaning to reread it, but when I read it the first time, I spent so much of my time in the footnotes. I knew that if I went at it again, I would want to take extra time so that I could actually follow up on those footnotes. So I think that's sort of why I'm stalling on doing it. And then there's some obscure stuff in there, like Anderson's The Value of Money. It's a great classic piece of monetary theory, totally outdated, but still makes some really nice points that you could argue are relevant, but a lot of my favorite parts are criticisms of other people who are writing at his time. There's actually a really neat criticism of the quantity theory of money in there. It doesn't actually hold up, especially with the way we deal with it today, but it's still fun. Going on here, we have lots of Austrian economics, predictably. We have Ludwig von Mises here on the right, mostly Liberty Fund editions. I'd like to have all their Liberty Fund Mises. I don't love how they broke out Human Action into 2 volumes, although there is a logical way to do it, and they took that approach, so it's not all that objectionable either. And then we have Hayek. There's a mix of volumes here, although you'll notice it is mostly, again, Liberty Fund. That's partly because they have great notes, nice introductions, but the main thing for me, I don't really need notes, is that they're affordable. The dream would be to have all the Chicago Press volumes. So I have The Fortunes of Liberalism, Law, Legislation, and Liberty, The Road to Serfdom, and The Constitution of Liberty. So I have most of the big stuff, but they're doing the complete Hayek. They're just more expensive, so that's going to be something I'll have to build out over time. There's some Joseph Schumpeter, my guy, although there is a depressing, glaring omission here. W.H. Hutt, Weber, Don Lavoie. A lot of people who get interested in Austrian economics skip over him, but these are great advances in the economic calculation debate. If you're interested in the subject, you know what Mises says, you know what Hayek says, but a lot of people skip these, and you really shouldn't. He's awesome. Some public choice, and then we get into Deidre McCloskey again. Lots of methodology there, actually. Israel Kirzner, he's another guy who's skipped over by people who are interested in economics very often anyhow, but you at least have to read his stuff on entrepreneurship. Armin Elchin, great economist, totally underrated. Both Elchin and Kirzner arguably deserved Nobel Prizes. And his book, Universal Economics, that textbook is really great. It used to be called University Economics, but the reprint, again, from Liberty Fund, came out as Universal Economics, and you can get that at a pretty affordable price. Then we go into some classical economics here, some physiocrats in there, and then of course Keynesian economics. And as we're going through this, I really maybe should just take all the Liberty Fund editions I have in my apartment and group them together. But a lot of them are US history and politics and things, so I'd be worried about losing track of where things are if I did that, so maybe not. We'll see. I'll think about it. And this is more of a mix. You can see lots of Marxist economics. There's some great classic volumes in here. I don't think a lot of people know the two Marxisms, but that's an awesome book. Kolakowski's Main Currents of Marxism, again, really fantastic. Wesley Clare Mitchell's Types of Economic Theory. I only have volume 2. There is a volume 1, but I simply can't find it. My professor, my advisor in undergrad, had both volumes. He needed a duplicate of the second volume, and that's where I got that. And then he would just let me consult the first volume whenever I wanted to. I would really love to find that. He is best known for his work in business cycle theory, I think, and some old, early, I should say, rather than old, even though it is old, some early, statistical work. But he did a class on history of thought, and I believe that's what those are pulled from. And then here we get into politics. You can see there's conservatism on the left into the middle, including plenty of volumes that I hate, like Hazoni's or Regime Change, but that's still a little bit of a fad, so I do have to consult them, unfortunately. And then we get into books on liberalism, The Invention of the Individual. That's a great book. Going on down here, I think we're getting into, looks like pretty much essay collections with some other odds and ends, facing out here. So you've got Oakeshott, Russell Kirk. For some reason, the Winter War, and then the book on communism and socialism. This is also a small classic if you're interested in socialism. I thought Verso Books put that out, although I don't know what press that T is. Plenty of William F. Buckley, of course, and then some old omnibuses. I would love to find volume 1 of this. This is the Conservative Book Club. And I don't know what's in the other volumes, but this has some neat stuff in there, like Henry Hazlitt. So there we are. And then going on, well, as you can see, George Will is well represented from here to here. I think this is all the essay collections he's come out with. I really need to take these stickers off. I love George Will's writing. I don't always agree with it, and even with his style, sometimes it bothers me, but when it works, it really works. And I shouldn't lie, I have all of his stuff here. I am definitely a fan. Also, we have Charles Krauthammer. Cutting Edges you won't see so often, but these 2 essay collections from his stuff at the Washington Post are ubiquitous at garage sales, thrift stores, used book shops, and I think they get glanced over precisely because you see them all the time, but then also people don't tend to read essay collections as much anymore. But if you are interested in, you should grab them. There really isn't a dud in there, if I remember right. And I seriously miss his voice in the national conversation. I go to those a fair amount, actually. There are some real standout essays that I'll go back and reread. Going on here, this is actually his dad, Friedrich Will, but this is a work of philosophy. P.J. O'Rourke, that omnibus is nice. P.J. O'Rourke's humor doesn't work on me in the way it works on other people, but I do like him. Oh, here, I wish Andrew Ferguson had more collections. This is the only one he has. He used to be at the Weekly Standard, And he didn't choose the title for this book. He mentioned it in an interview. It's Fools' Names, Fools' Faces. I think the full phrase is something like fools' names, like fools' faces, are things you often see in public places, or something to that effect. These are, as you can tell from the cover here, it's a series of profiles. But I just love his writing so much. I really wish someone with a hunk of money would just pay to collect his best work. I've been reading him for years, and he truly is a favorite writer of mine. Yeah, and then we get into more obscure David stuff, like, Vermont Royster. Who reads Vermont Royster? Okay. Oh, there's a cartoon here. You'd be angry too if your alter ego is a successful physician. I probably meant to frame that. As you probably have already seen, not just on the wall, I have New Yorker photos framed all over the place. So this painting commemorates the moment a friend actually read a book I recommended. This is feel free to borrow any book so long as it's not load-bearing. This is a favorite of mine because I edited it to work with my Wi-Fi password. As you can tell, I'm a fan of Frasier and Lord of the Rings. This is a really sweet one, too. Why, of course you were a good book. It's not your fault nobody read you. Anyway, let's press on here. Liberalism as a Way of Life. I've been meaning to reread this. This book stuck with me. It came out with, when was it? I think it came out last year, but it might have been the year before. The only thing about rereading this is, again, I know I'm going to be following up on the footnotes, and he relies heavily on John Rawls. And I haven't spent huge chunks of time with John Rawls in quite a while. So that's going to be another ordeal. We'll see. That's a really interesting book. And then essay collections here. You can see I put Christopher Hitchens by Gore Vidal because I thought I was being funny. And then, here's a whole barrage of books that a lot of you might be interested in if you're into this kind of thing. Utopia, The Perennial Heresy. This maybe doesn't belong here. But then Macedo's Liberal Virtues, still probably the best book on liberal virtues. I get the impression this came out of a thesis or academic paper or something like that. The style is not the most readable in the world, but it's still excellent. If you can work your way through it. I will, if I remember, link to a post I wrote on it below. And then The Enduring Tension, Capitalism and the Moral Order. This is a fairly new book, but I didn't see tons of people review it outside of libertarian outlets. But then the standard book on that subject, I think, is still Do Markets Corrupt Our Morals? If you're interested in politics in the way I am, especially free market theory, just this whole range of books, these are four that maybe you haven't heard of, and I think are worth your time. Another good example of someone I have just because I love their style is Michael Kinsley, but it has the worst title in the world. This is Curse of the Giant Muffins and Other Washington Maladies. He's another person. I still remember the first time I read him, and I thought, oh, wow, okay, I'm going to be reading a lot of you. I believe he's still kicking, but he's not writing anymore because he has, is it Parkinson's, I think? He hasn't written in some time. He'll be an interesting guy to see a biography of in years, I guess. And then here we have Superfluous Men. This is kind of a niche thing to pull out, but it's conservative critics of American culture 1900 to 1945, and it's writings of figures from the old right. The old right still doesn't have a definitive book on it. I can think of two. One of them is on this bookcase somewhere. One of them I don't have. Otherwise, they tend to get discussed more in histories like Continente's The Right has a good chunk on it. But the angle that people take with them is so often ideologically motivated. So what is the other book that I have on it? I think it's Rothbard's Betrayal of the American Right. Yeah, right here, which is actually the closest thing to an autobiography he ever wrote. But that has a very libertarian angle. He's much more sympathetic to certain figures of the old right than maybe you should be, that kind of thing. Same with Continente. He's definitely critical of it in the opposite way than Rothbard is. So I'm still waiting for a definitive book on the subject, but there isn't a lot, and it's nice to actually have a collection of their writings that I can go to. More Rothbard, who I just mentioned. Robert Higgs, Crisis and Leviathan. This is a classic. This is where he first, not first, but this is where he first fleshed out in detail his ratchet effect. And actually, the new independent review, which I have, or the new-ish independent review here, it goes over his ratchet effect. But I haven't read that yet. I have a feeling that may send me back to the book. It's definitely a classic. Okay, I need to stop talking about all of these. We have some small C conservatives here. Yuval Levin is probably one of our best small C conservative writers today. And then Jonathan Rauch, who I've been talking about recently. This is actually the book I mentioned before, The Kindly Inquisitors, of course with a foreword by George Will. I don't know why I have The Decadent Society here by Ross Douthat. I don't really like Ross Douthat all that much, but I kind of like this book. I thought it was okay. I think I reviewed it, actually, and gave it a mildly positive review, but if I had an e-copy of that, that'd be fine. That book can probably go too. Moving on here, we have slow collapse in thematic organization. So we have classics like Richard Ben Kramer's What It Takes, Hannah Arendt's The Origins of Totalitarianism, which is probably one of my top 5 or 10 books of all time. But I do have the new Library of America edition, so I don't know if I need that paperback. I will compare their critical apparatuses and see if I want to keep them both. But then also Francis Fukuyama's books here on political organizations. I know a lot of people don't like The End of History and The Last Man, which is right there, and I don't either. But these are awesome. If you're interested in political organizations and their history, these are fantastic reading experiences. A lot of really great information in them. Alan Ryan's On Politics. This is both an enjoyable reading experience and great information. I have the 2-volume box set actually in the bedroom, but I like keeping both on hand. Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions. One of the few really good, I guess you'd call it philosophy books from the last century. That's an awesome book. The Enchantments of Mammon, I argued with that a lot. I should reread that. And then just a whole mix of stuff. Marjorie Willems, oh my God, the final essays in here will make you bawl your eyes out. Mansur Olson's, he's probably a little underread today. Actually, this book, Roger Scruton, I don't have a lot of Roger Scruton here, but Fools, Frauds, and Firebrands, Thinkers of the New Left, was so much better than I thought it would be. I was ready for it to be a bad book. I mean, come on with a title like that. But I thought it was really thoughtful, really careful criticism, and I felt validated in that opinion because Matt McManus, who's a socialist writer, wrote a piece on it. If I can remember, I'll link to it down below. And he was positively disposed towards it too, even though he disagreed with it, of course. Pursuit of the Millennium, that's a great book too. Going on here, more collapse in theme. The Power Game is classic. The Weirdest People in the World, that came out a few years ago. That's a great book. I should reread that as well. Some wonderful essay collections here. More that I keep also for style. So I love Cynthia Ozick. I read her first in The Atlantic. I remember a piece. And she's just got this old style that you don't find anymore. So I got those and read through them. I'm really a fan of her writing. Tim Kreider, he might be Dude Bro. I guess you might consider him. But I love his style as well. He's definitely one of those people where you read him and you feel like you know him. Like you could have a beer with him. And actually he talks about that, I think, in one of his essays. Fatal Discord, of course. Lots of good stuff in here. Oh my. And then down here, oh my gosh, if you want to cry again, Love is a Mixtape, you will bawl your eyes out. Natural Supernaturalism, that's wonderful. A Book of One's Own. Lots of good stuff down here. Tom Wolfe, Clive James. So you can see how, it's not just politics, especially as you get toward the bottom. So those are the first 2 bookcases. Economics, politics, essays, kind of general nonfiction. Okay, let's press on here to World War II. So how do I want to approach this? I guess we should just go from the top to the bottom. So here we have single volume overviews, and I'm working through all of these. Some of these, as you might know, I've already done. So Victor Davis Hanson's The Second World Wars, Total War, This History of Total War by Miller, although not just Miller, it really was a committee, a group of people, but that I think might be the earliest single volume overview. I've written about all those. Scorched Earth, and I've been reading them a little randomly now, but I think I need to start taking like approaches and reading them together. So since I did Scorched Earth, I think I need to do Blood and Runes next, and then maybe I can go on and read these classic popular ones, Antony Beevor, Max Hastings, Andrew Roberts. They take similar approaches, and what I mean by that is they set up the history, they set it up chronologically, and then they move the narrative along and fill in the gaps by following individuals, individual units, right? And using the journals to construct that narrative. It gets a little old, if I'm going to be honest, if you read as much of this stuff as I do, but it's a perfectly legitimate way to do the history. So I think those would be sensible to read together. And then big idea books would be next, maybe, and then more military history. So I could do, what, A War to Be Won and A World at Arms together, something like that. But my favorite kind is the idea books. So, I mean, even though I argued with it, Scorched Earth, Blood and Runes, the best example, modern example, would be Stalin's War. Those kinds of things could go together. Anyhow, let's keep going. This gets into kind of war in the West. So this is war in Europe. And then Atkinson's trilogy, which is awesome. The last volume is the best of the three in my view, but all of them together work as a nice history of the war in the West. And then Peter Caddick Adams' trilogy. The first one that came out is Snow and Steel on the Battle of the Bulge. It's still the best of the three. I think it was kind of a passion project, and I think that's borne out in the reading experience. But the other two are still great books. Sand and Steel is on D-Day, and then Fire and Steel is just the end of the war. Great stuff. And then going on here, we have Weimar, Germany. This is new, and I haven't read it yet. I'm going to reread this book on Weimar, Germany, and then do this one immediately after, and then maybe write about them together. That's why I'm waiting. And then we get into Beerhall Putsch, 20s, 30s history, interwar period. The Dark Valley is a good book. It's not so good on economics, but as you can see there, as a panorama of the 1930s, it's a nice overview. And then we get into Munich, and then sort of general Third Reich history. Michael Burley's, that's a heck of a reading experience. And then down here, Hitler's Empire. Actually, Hitler's Empire, Mark Mazauer is great. And I also have, as we'll see a little bit later, his book Dark Continent, which is, I think, maybe my second favorite after Tony Jute's post-war book. Anyhow, Hitler's Empire and The Wages of Destruction would go together nicely, I believe. Both fantastic. Naturally, I can't skip over Richard Shire's The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. Hitler's People, which has been on my mind since I just read Lawrence Rees's new release, The Nazi Mind, and I reviewed that too. And then more general overviews, so single-volume overviews of the Third Reich, and then two great trilogies, Frank McDonough's, which is newer than here, Richard Evans. Richard Evans is still my favorite, but if you've been looking at both of them, either will serve you well. I would just gently nudge you in this direction. My favorite of the three volumes is The Coming of the Third Reich, and I've reread it the most, but The Third Reich in Power is a depressing and also fantastic reading experience. The Third Reich at War I liked, but I only read it once. I really should reread it. I feel like I've been neglecting it, so I'm sorry, poor thing. Sometimes I feel bad if I neglect books like that, so maybe I ought to get to that. Actually, I could use that as part of my go-through of overviews if I decide to continue to books that are only overviews of the war in Europe or only overviews of the war in the Pacific. Right now, I'm limiting to myself to the overviews that cover both, right? So these wouldn't count in my project. And then over here, we get into the German Army, as you can see from the titles. This is a great book. It relies on letters, going from the front to families. So what did people know about what was happening on the front? That kind of thing. This is a wonderful overview of the German Army. Probably my favorite. This one, I don't know if I'll keep this one. Probably I will, but I should reread it and then decide. I should reread all three and then decide. And then we go on, and we're starting to get into the war proper here. I mean, we have how the Allies won, and then this book is on strategy. This is early Blitzkrieg, I think. What is this, 41 to something? Does it even say? Rise of Hitler, the Fall of Dunkirk, so 1940. Britain at War, and then Poland, Fall of France. This is actually a great book. This also relies a lot on journals, but he does it in a way that's not quite so boring to me as some other histories. This I go to a lot when I am reading about Dunkirk. That's a nice volume. And it has quotes in there from journals that are really good and not always quoted in maybe some overviews like this, or certainly not some of these single volumes, but just because they don't have the space to go into that much detail. Oddly, I only have one book on the war in North Africa. The thing that got me interested in World War II was the Battle of the Atlantic, and then from there I moved to the war in North Africa, so it's odd that I only have the one book. But then we spill into, well, this is on the Mediterranean. Maybe you've seen this, but this is on the whole theater. But then I get into Italy, Sicily. This is all James Holland, I guess. The Savage Storm, Casino, Italy, Sorrow. And from his book on Sicily through these, although he doesn't have North Africa, maybe he has a book on North Africa, but not to my knowledge. If he does, it's much earlier than I'm aware. But altogether, it's going to give you a lot of nice, accessible literature on the Mediterranean theater. The main omission I have from James Holland actually is a book on Burma, which is a genuine contribution. I don't know if I said this before. Well, I like James Holland a lot. And I read him just because it's good, plain fun to me. He isn't a brilliant historian. He's not really a groundbreaking historian. He has some tics I don't love, and he is working in reaction to a lot of early post-war historians who are hypercritical of the Allies, and I think he swings the pendulum too far in the other direction sometimes, but I still really like him. But what I'm saying is his book on Burma is his one book, maybe, that is truly a great contribution. Although his book, Casino 44, is certainly one of the best on it, now that I'm thinking about it. Although I do like some of the older volumes better. In terms of what you're going to see in the bookstore, that's probably the best one you can get. Anyhow, more overviews: Salerno, Anzio, Casino, so maybe his Casino book should be over here, Rome, and then the day after Rome fell, we get into D-Day. And actually, I have his Holland's D-Day book here horizontally for a couple of reasons. One, it's not the best or my favorite on the subject. It's not even my third favorite on the subject. Two, the paperback had significant revisions, and so therefore, three, I guess, I don't know if I'm going to keep it. I may give it to my brother if he doesn't have a copy, or just stuff it in a little free library. Actually, I should take it down now because I know next time I reread it, it will be in the paperback. Okay, anyhow. Then here we get into naval history. I'm going to sit down, if you'll pardon me. Hitler's U-boat war, excuse me, good grief. That means this video is starting to get too long, but we'll try to stick to it. I'm already not mellifluous, and I already stumble over my words when I'm talking, but I can always tell when I reach a point in the video when I've been rambling too much because I start doing things like that. Anyway, we'll try to get through it. What I was saying is I still haven't read the second volume yet, still only the first. That'll be in the coming future, I hope. And then, well, this is supposed to be Atlantic, Battle of the Atlantic, the naval war against Hitler's empire, but these include the Pacific. That's fine, I guess. And then as we go from there, we have books on the sinking of the Bismarck. I'm missing a couple. When I said what got me interested in World War II was the Battle of the Atlantic, what I really mean is it started with the sinking of the Bismarck. I saw a documentary on PBS or something when I was in like 3rd or 4th grade and totally fell in love with this subject because ships are really cool when you're that age. And so I still go back and read these sometimes. Although if you're interested in more narrow stuff like that, the Iron Sea is probably the one to get. That is a fun book. I really love there's 2 chapters that really stand out in this. The one on the Channel Dash and then also the one on the St. Nazaire raid. This is a fun book. Also, when I was making, I think I said this in a video the other week, I was making the point that most people don't get interested in this subject by way of single volume overviews. Typically, you find something more narrow and then spread out from there. So for me, it was the sinking of Bismarck, then the Battle of the Atlantic, and then North Africa, and then boom, boom, boom from there. If you want a keyhole history that might get you into this subject, if I were to make a list of those, the Iron Sea would probably be on it. Anyhow, we get into the air campaign. So, of course, we have Hamburg, we have Dresden. But the Dams raid is an interesting keyhole history, too. And I think that Max Hastings and James Holland, oh my God, James Holland is a theme here, I guess. But they read together nicely because they disagree on the efficacy of the Dams raid. And there's some great dramatic notes in both of those books, both in terms of, what the bombing raid was, which is a remarkable thing, but then also in terms of the personalities and some of the human drama in them. Really interesting stuff. And then down here, what do we have? Then we have Crossing the Rhine, Arnhem, A Bridge Too Far. Those all go together. Among the Dead Cities, hell of a book by A.C. Grayling. And then we get A Time for Trumpets and Fatal Crossing. If you were interested in Battle of the Bulge, I would get Snow and Steel, A Time for Trumpets, and Fatal Crossing. 2 overviews and then 1 keyhole history. And that will give you a lot of good reading on that. And then we get into the end of the war. Antony Beevor's The Fall of Berlin is a depressing read, but is still maybe the best book on the subject, although I do really like Cornelius Ryan's book on it as well. And then Ian Kershaw's The End is also an amazing book. You know, if you were to have a smaller collection of World War II books than I do, and you wanted, you know, to know what the books to have are to keep in your permanent collection, you know, you can see some of those here. The End would be on that list. My brother just finished it, and he had to text me the other day saying, "Oh my gosh, what a book!" You know, The Fall of Berlin would probably be on it. I think A Time for Trumpets would be on it. You know, so there's some really good stuff here. So let's go back up here. Where are we at? Okay, we have War in the East, and I need a lot more. Absolute War. This is also such a good book on the War in the East. One of my favorite overviews. These two books, Ostkrieg and Bloodlands, are essentially on the same thing. Both are good. Both more or less uses the same sources, frankly. But Bloodlands, if you have to choose, is the one to get. There's a fact on every page that will leave your jaw on the floor, but both are really good. We get into Barbarossa. There is a new book on Barbarossa coming out, so maybe I need to go back to these. Although I want David Stahl's book on Barbarossa. These three are on the battles around Moscow, and they're fantastic, and he's one of the people that, in terms of contemporary scholarship, you kind of have to grapple with when you're dealing with the war in Russia. So I'm happy that I have that here, but I want his Barbarossa book. And then also, now that I'm looking, I don't have Alan Clark, so I'm lacking. I also don't have anything on Leningrad, good grief. So this is all War in the East, and then these are single volume overviews too. So this is the Penguin History of World War II, but that is the same thing as Total War. I'm just going to keep that till it falls apart because I do like the form factor. And then Antony Beevor's The Second World War, that's also a UK edition. I got this when I was out in Boston, just because I like the form factor and the cover, but that won't hold up. So I do have the hardcover here, as you probably already saw. Okay, and now we get into the War in the Pacific. Some nice overviews here. Maybe my favorites are the Pacific War and then the War of Empire, or a War of Empires, which is newer. Plenty of Gordon Pranga. I was reading, this has a bookmark in it because I was rereading some of it, and I really had to fight myself from just going through the whole book. I forgot how good of company Gordon Pranga is. I mean, the way he draws his personalities is almost novelistic, and he puts in so many small, nice details. He's just so good. And then down here we have John McManus. This is his trilogy on the U.S. Army in the Pacific, which is just some good, clean family fun. Okay, it's not good, clean family fun, but it is a lot of fun. And he's one of my favorite American writers about the war in the Pacific. Really top-notch stuff. I would encourage you to read these if you're interested in them. Again, you will just have fun with them. They're great history. Tower of Skulls, there's a depressing read. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Hiroshima, I think Nagasaki is coming out this year. Ian Toll's trilogy on the naval war in the Pacific is masterful. It is masterful. I was at Barnes & Noble the other week, and they had a new box set of it, and the spines formed a picture, which was awfully tempting, but these will do. These are really nice. Stilwell and the American Experience in China. I still kind of think that's probably the best book on Stilwell. Going on here, oh boy, yep, we have Holocaust materials. Some really good stuff in here too. So in terms of, again, if you don't want to have a bookshelf full of stuff on the Holocaust, I'll probably end up with one at the end of the day. You can see this gets into Nuremberg and the Tokyo trials, but you don't really want one. If you're going to have a few essential books on the Holocaust, there's 4 good examples here. KL, which is on the camp system, The War Against the Jews, which is a classic, and then the Holocaust, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Leni Yahil, I hope I'm saying that right, The Fate of European Jewry. And that came out, I want to say, in the 90s, at a time when there was a whole bunch of new scholarship coming out of the Holocaust, and a new kind of scholarship, and this was sort of part of that, if I remember correctly. And so I was paging through that over the weekend because I got e-copies of that upcoming Oxford, I think it's Oxford, right? Yeah, Oxford History of the Holocaust, and it's 4 volumes, and I started reading that a little bit, but I was paging through this because it was on my mind, and I may end up rereading it. We'll see. That's an awful lot of Holocaust material. But those three would be good, and then the Nazi Doctors, those would be great standard books to have on the Holocaust. But if you are just looking for one that's accessible, Lawrence Rees's is just fine too. So going on here, pardon me, we have 2 books on Nuremberg, 2 books on the Tokyo trial, some interesting documents on interrogations from the Nazi elite in Allied hands. That's put together by Richard Overy. The most interesting to me, although Albert Speer is fascinating, I've always found Goering to be the most interesting. I think he was the cleverest of the Nazi elite, but I mean his just total delusional outlook comes through when you're reading those. And then Blind Eye to Murder, that's a very angry book. That's a good one too. I did find a review of it online, I think from the TLS or something like that when it first came out, that was pretty negative, but I thought it was sort of unfairly negative, to be honest. And then down here we have, just a mix. So we have books on some of the famous conferences from World War II. I think I've mentioned this before, Behind Closed Doors by Lawrence Rees. I love this book. The Pope at War. He's a great author to read on this subject, just having to do with the Vatican and World War II and the Holocaust, excuse me. These are great books. India's War and Mussolini's War. There's another volume, I think, called Italy's War I would like to have. And then a couple New Deal ones. I actually still haven't read A Call to Arms. I got this on a previous trip to Boston, and I simply haven't read it. But The New Dealer's War is a book you will argue with, but it is great. In terms of books on the New Deal, it's one to have. And then down here we get to World War I. Some of them I've read, some of them I haven't. I really like A World Undone. Dreadnought, naturally. Paris 1919 is awesome, and it's still something that gets referenced all the time. The Hello Girls is a great keyhole history. But I did just get this Eastern Front and Western Front books, so I would like to read those. Oh, The Deluge, of course, that's one you have to have, Adam Tooze. So some good stuff down there. Okay, this is, oh my God, 44 minutes, so that's enough. I spent too much time at these bookcases. I apologize. Let's spin around here, and now here we have my classics, and you can see all the Penguin classics are together. All the Oxford classics are together. All the Viking portables are together. And then we get to some Norton Criticals and then just odds and ends editions. There's a few that are there stuffed behind the couch because it peers beyond the wall over the bookcase. But there's only a few and I know what they are, so it's not like the most disruptive thing in the world, right? So we won't look at those in detail just because we're running out of time. And then here I have my Library of America volumes, and these are all stuff that I know I like. I mean, plenty of Mark Twain, Edgar Allan Poe, World War II reporting, H.L. Mencken, this great Prejudices volume. If you're a fan of Mencken, and I really do like him, these are ones to have. Galbraith, and this is the new Hannah Arendt I was talking about. And then we have this Trollope Palliser novels, and then Democracy in America. I just threw them on top because I wasn't sure where else to put them. And then we have some poetry anthologies that I put here to guilt myself about not reading them. I mean, there are, as you see, tabs in them and bookmarks, but I tend to go back and reread the ones I already know I like. What I should do is just put one on my bedside and slowly work through it each night. I'm just not a poetry guy. I don't get it. Sometimes I feel like I need to have them explained to me, but I don't think that's true. If they're doing their job, I just need to build that muscle and get used to it. And then here we have the great Everyman's Library editions. My favorites are the George Orwell, Mark Twain, and Edmund Burke. Mark Twain because I like his nonfiction more. Oh, and the Kipling. Those are my favorites. And then down here we have more anthologies, plenty on Shakespeare. A couple omnibuses. You can see the two running presses there, which I'd love to have. Some natural history, Darwin and whatnot. I'd like to have a better place for those, but that's just where they fit. Children's books and Calvin and Hobbes, of course. And then here you have more Shakespeare, the Divine Comedy, Jack London, the Raj Quartet, and whatnot. So it's a little bit more of a mix here, but you can still see there's plenty of classics, and I pretty much have them in one place. And then over here we have U.S. history. The War of the Revolution. This is a good volume. And they're all good volumes. I mean, the Framers' Q is awesome. I mean, I don't think there's really a dud on the top shelf there. So you can see it's early history, and then it goes into Civil War history, into some overviews, and then more contemporary stuff. These Taylor Branch books, I forget what the trilogy is called. I think it's the King Years or something like that. You hate to say required reading, but they are that good. They are that good. That's a wonderful trilogy. The Age of Reagan is great. So more U.S. history. And then over here, world history. This is Dark Continent. This is what I was talking about before. And some other post-war stuff. Tony Jute, of course, Out of Ashes. Just a bunch there. Some Soviet history or Cold War history. And then things break down again just because I don't have as much world history. So it's just a little harder to group things together. So there's that. And now let's press on to my reading nook. I sit here all the time by the window, and I especially love it because when this tree blooms, it's just lovely to look out at. But here I have the book tower, and this is religion, mostly Christianity, but there's atheism on there, there's some on Judaism, and a mix of things, just predominantly Christianity. I was so happy to find this 2-volume set of The Death of the Messiah, because I already had The Birth of the Messiah by Raymond Brown. And I was freaking out about it for a while, just so pleased with myself. And then I went back to Majors and Quinn months and months later, and I found the hardcover box set, which is in my room right now, and that completely shattered me. I didn't even know the thing existed. And then here, of course, more New Yorker wall art. I love these. I know that this doesn't go with the other two, but it just makes me smile to look at. And so does this one. I mean, how can you not look at that and get just a warm smile out of your face? And then, of course, this is bookish and seasonal, so I love those. There's my corner bar that mostly collects dust. And this little lamp here, so between this, which fits perfectly, and this, I can put them on and have perfect reading light, and I don't ever have to turn on this ugly headlight. So it's a nice reading nook with a sailing picture, and then naturally more New Yorker cartoons. Some of them funny, like this, and then some of them a little heavier, like this. And then over here, we do have more books. That's why we're over here. This is where I stuff my mass market paperbacks, and it is a mess. Not much in the way of organization at all. Oh, I guess maybe there's science fiction on the bottom. And this is just all the mass markets, regardless of the subject. So you'll get historical fiction to economics to whatever. And then over here, we have odds and ends. This is mystery, I guess, some fantasy. Say Nothing is in there. I don't know why. That doesn't belong there. Some old independent reviews. I've subscribed to them for a long time, and it's just a quality publication, so I do save them. National Affairs I should subscribe to. A couple old textbooks. So just a mix of stuff. Naturally, these were meant for chinaware and wine glasses and whatnot, but I just stuff them with books. These are books that I took off my shelves, and those will be going to little free libraries. I already got rid of some, and I'll try to go back through and see if I can find some more to get rid of. But that's why those are there with the totes. And then here we have fiction. So, books with characters, made-up stories, plot lines, a rising action, a climax, a falling action, a conclusion. I've read most of these, actually. I don't read a lot of fiction, so I tend to only keep the stuff. I don't accumulate that much in the first place, but then I also tend to only keep the things that I know I like. So plenty of Tolkien there, Dune. Most of those are new. And then here, some of this is probably the closest I get to Dude Bro. I mean, Greg Iles, I don't know if he's considered Dude Bro, but you can see Tom Wolfe, Thomas Pynchon, Gunther Grass, although Martha Gellhorn is there, so there's a woman. Gore Vidal, Larry McMurtry. And then here's a mix of stuff too. Oh God, I love pretty much every book on this shelf. Going up here, I was happy to find a hardcover of And the Ladies of the Club because the paperback will never hold up. The mass market, maybe you saw it when we were poking around in here. Where is it? Yeah, here it is. See, this won't really hold up realistically, so that was a nice thing to find. And then I have my wine rack here, and I felt like an idiot. I've had this for 2 years, and I realized like a couple weeks ago that it's shaped like a wine bottle. I don't know how I missed that. And then I have some tacky wall art here. I love this stuff. I found them all thrift shopping. Very much an old man's style of apartment. Okay, so let's press on into the bedroom, and then we really ought to wrap this up. So first I should say, you see that corner wall? That's bare because I used to have a TV on that duvet, but I recently got rid of it because I wasn't using it, and it opened that all up. So I do need to get more wall art. I just haven't gone thrift shopping. So when you come into the room, in the bedroom here, I have Wotansky's Wisdom of Conservatism, and then I have some non-New Yorker art. This I wish I didn't have anymore. I bought this years ago, and I keep it because it fills the space above the bed nicely. But it's a canvas, which I don't love, and then it's also abstract, which I don't like anymore either. And then over here, this is my biography bookcase, and this is the biggest mess of the lot. They all have double rows. There isn't much of an organization. Some politics, again, Buckley and Gore Vidal are by each other because I'm that funny. Terry Teachout, Whittaker Chambers, some celebrity stuff, I guess, but it doesn't make a ton of sense. And then down here, this does make more sense. This whole row and the whole back row are economists and political thinkers. Some presidents here too. And then down here, the back row is all dictator biographies. And I try to fill books in front of them. So let's just say I have someone over and they spend the night. They don't wake up to Hitler staring them in the face. My favorite, though, is of the Hitler biographies is Alan Bullock's. You've probably seen his dual biography of Hitler and Stalin, but the reason I like this so much, I mean, the best contemporary one is probably Peter Longerich, but I like it so much because he so obviously hates Hitler, and if neo-Nazis could read, there are so many wonderful, juicy passages in there that would just make their blood boil. It's great if you find it. And I think back here's Kershaw's and someone else's. Yeah, and then more of the 2-volume there. And then for some reason, Mountbatten's on the end with Monty and Rommel. And then down here we have a few more, like, the great Shadow Casey autobiography. I love those. Let's see what's behind these. Okay, more. Oh, the Diderot one. That's a good book. Lots of great stuff back here. Oh, Hackett's Henry VIII. I love this volume. Oh, jeez. Yep, see, it's the bookshelves are rebelling. Queen Mother is fantastic. Cleopatra. I probably don't need this Cleopatra, honestly. So that's the biography bookcase. I do just need a second bookcase and then somehow find a spot for it to organize those, then probably get rid of some. And then over here, I put pretty much all the box sets in the apartment. Just lined them up. It seemed like a natural place to put it. And then I put these here, The History of Private Life, and then the Avenel Kipling, or John le Carré, excuse me, and then the Octopus Heinemann Kipling. And then over here, we have some World War I, World War II wall art. Although now that I'm thinking about it, if you don't want someone to wake up to a Hitler biography, this is probably a little weird too. So I either need to move them or just get enough normal wall art to make them not seem so weird on their own. But over here, part of the reason I like box sets by the bed is they're their own table, so I can put the lamp on it and the light is at a nice angle from where I'm laying in bed. Since I'm an intellectual, I'm already flipping through some Calvin and Hobbes, or always rather. And then here is, of course, the 2 book on politics that I was talking about. So, and an alarm clock. I should say I have a physical alarm clock because I often like to leave my leave my phone in a different room at night, and then it's just not a distraction. I only read, and then I can set the physical alarm clock. Okay, so this is almost an hour long, and I'm sure with that first clip I made, it'll be over an hour. So I need to cut this off, but those are my bookcases. That pretty much is my apartment. I guess you've more or less seen the whole thing at this point. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see if in the next month I do get to organizing these 2 bookcases. Okay, all right, I'm going to call it a day. Have a good one. Thank you.